we're gonna jump back in, and we have just killed Magni and Moby ran off. Okay.
Yep.
And I can talk in another video a little bit more about Magni and Modi and like their relationship to Thor and like who's their mom and all that stuff, because I think some people had some questions about that. And I think that it sounds like there's some like backstory with the two of them in the game that has to do with like their parents and their sister. So I'll try to disentangle all of that in a separate video. But for now, we will forge ahead.
Yeah, sounds good. So yeah, we got the chisel. So now we're going to be making our way to the next step in our journey here. Mimir is going to give us a little preview of what we're going to be doing next. So onward.
What now then? Maybe Freya ought to have a look at the boy.
No, I feel better now. I just needed to catch my breath. Where do we go next?
Well, now that we've got the giant's chisel, we need to learn the travel rune to Jotunheim, so we can carve it into that special gateway atop the peak, and open realm travel to the land of the giants.
You don't know it?
Alas, no. But the serpent did mention that the giants had entrusted that secret to Tyr.
Isn't Tyr dead?
Aye, but his hidden vault is very much in reach. The doors are beneath his temple, submerged in the lake for generations until our snake friend shifted his weight. There we shall find the fabled Black Rune of Jotunheim.
We could also explore some more. We got that chisel now, and that vault isn't going anywhere. Seems a shame to waste the boat.
We shall see, boy.
I have a question. If Ymir was the first giant, where did he come from?
In the beginning, there was Ginnungagap, the great void. There were no realms yet, only primordial forces. There was fire, and there was ice. And there in the void they met and produced...
Water?
more than water. The mystic lifeblood of something entirely new. From this water, Ymir took form and became a being of pure creation and chaos, mother and father to all that came after.
Even the Aesir?
Aye. Every god, man, and beast came first from Ymir's flesh. Though it was the Aesir who thought themselves so superior that they should hold dominion over the rest of creation. It was Odin who took arms against his creator and spilled Ymir's lifeblood with his spear. A necessary evil, he would say, to bring order to the realms. From Ymir's torn flesh, Odin would fashion the realm of Midgard for his own. Called himself All-Father, as if he was the creator and not the creator's destroyer.
Okay.
What was it? Gnip?
Ginnungagap means like
Gnip.
gaping. Yeah. Okay. So that was like a really good account of Ymir and the like pre-creation times, this like time of like primordial chaos where there was nothing. So like there are two, like the two sources I always refer to are the Poetic Edda and then Snorri's Prose Edda. And they both talk about Ymir. And Ymir was this kind of like primeval being. He was really the first being. And the Poetic Edda talks about in the Severus's prophecy, it says, young were the years when Ymir made his settlement. There was no sand, nor sea, nor cool waves. Earth was nowhere, nor the sky above. Chaos yawned, grass was there nowhere. And chaos yawned is kind of like a translation of Ginnungagap, which is like gaping void.
Mm.
And Snorri gives us more information about this in the prose Edda. So, like, the poetic Edda seems to like sort of presuppose knowledge among the people for whom the poems were like were intended, like that they kind of had contacts, that they'd be like, oh yeah, Ymir, he's this guy, and this is the event. And so it's really difficult to kind of extract the larger context from just the poems because it seems to, yeah, like assume that everybody who's reading them or would have been listening to them rather like had a general knowledge and a context to refer to. And so Snorri's really great about sort of filling in that context. And he does that. And he does talk about Ymir. So Ymir is just like they said, like there was this like cold region and then there was the hot region, Niflheim and Muspelheim, and they came together and there was like in Ginnungagap. and there was a likeness of a man, Snorri says, sprang up from the meeting of these two hot and cold regions, and he was named Ymir. And he like fed himself on this primeval cow that
Oh yeah.
Oikumla.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it said that there was icy rime that dripped and that formed this cow, and she nourished Ymir, and then she was licking like the blocks of ice that were forming
Hmm.
between those two realms in Ginnungagap. And from these icy blocks, like came about the first man. So there was Ymir, who's this primeval being. There was Oidhumla, who was the cow that fed him. And then there was Buri, who was the man who came out of the ice blocks that the cow was then in turn licking. And he had a son named Bor, and somehow he gets a wife. We don't know where she comes from. We have this like whole mythological worldview where it's you just have to accept that weird things happen and people just spring up out of nowhere. And he took it as his wife, a woman named Besla. And she was the daughter of all of a sudden there's other people around. So Borthold, the giant, and they had three sons. So it's like there was only one being, Ymir, and then there was Authunla, and then the first man. But then again, there was like other people that, anyway, it doesn't make sense, but that's how mythology is. Anyway, Buri had a son named Bor. Bor married Besla, and they had three sons. That's Odin, Vili, and Ve. And Odin, Vili, and Ve, like the first thing that they do is they kill the giant Ymir, and it says when he fell, so much blood gushed from his wounds that it drowned the race of the frost giants, except for one, and that's the one who survives, and the frost giants um come from him. And then it says that the sons of Bor, so Odin, Vili, and Ve, took Ymir, moved him to the middle of Ginnunga Gap, and made from him the world. So the game says like they use him to fashion Midgard, but they actually use him to like fashion the entire cosmos. So it
Mm.
says from his blood they made the sea and the lakes, the earth was fashioned from the flesh, and the mountain cliffs from the bones. They made stones and gravel from the teeth and the molars and those bones that were broken. And yeah, so they made the sea. It kind of reiterates that. They took his skull and made the sky from it. And under the four corners of the skull, they placed a dwarf under each of the four corners. They're called east, west, north, and south. Um, yeah, and that's basically it. Like he was that's a really accurate account
Hmm.
of Ymir. Though I would just add that like it wasn't just Midgard that they used, it was the entire
Hmm.
kind of world itself. They used his body and like the or whatever remained of his body to put the world into order. And
Mm.
then began that period of like the gods establishing their rule and reckoning time and blah blah blah. So
Yeah, it's interesting. Here in the entry here, it sounds like things were coming were things coming out of his body while he was still alive, or was it after? Because it
it
says
seems
here
like
things spring from
after.
his body, not just other giants, but wind, trees, sun, maggots that turn into dwarves, maybe.
Yeah,
Then Odin kills him. So it might just be a
okay.
different
So
interpretation,
just a little
but
bit
it
of
sounds.
a different interpretation. I mean, it sounds cool
Hmm.
this way too. Like,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's a little bit of a different order that they're presenting it in. But for the most part, the way that Mimir is presenting it is very sort of in line with what we know from both Snorri's Edda and the Poetic Edda. And we get
Hmm.
some more kind of other, allusions to this in other poems that I'm just not going to get into.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's the first kind of the primeval being, and the world is created from his body and at the same time is also built around the world tree Yggdrasil. So that's
Hmm.
something that is those two things together sort of form the world as it was understood. And it's sort of like this is the first kind of major conflict between, the Aesir and the Jötnar, that
Mm.
kind of set the tone for what's to come and how the whole, like the entirety of the mythology is about a conflict between the Jötnar and the Aesir. And I think that's one
Hmm.
thing that's really cool about this game is it really seems to be giving the perspective of the people that um kind of got screwed over by the Aesir in
Yeah.
various ways,
Yep.
like the Jötnar, but others as well and they're not portraying the Aesir as the good guys. It's
Hmm.
sort of telling the mythology from the side of and that's sort of what I've been mulling over since our last video. It's been telling the mythology from the perspective of like the other creatures
Hmm.
that the sources sort of present as like lesser, beneath the Aesir in some way, and they present the Aesir as sort of like the characters that you're meant to, um, you know, idolize and worship and whatever. But
Hmm.
that's one thing I think
And
is
then
really
less,
cool about this game.
yeah, yeah. And even with the mythology kind of focused on the Aesir, the other people and things like that are still impacted by their actions,
Mhm.
obviously, like the Jotnar and anyone else who might be there. So yeah, it's an interesting perspective. I agree.
Yeah, and like the
Um,
Vanir too, because like there's also
mhm,
this like in the beginning of time, shortly after this happens, that and the gods kind of start to establish everything, and they get set the sun and the moon in place and reckon time and do all
mhm.
that stuff. They have the war with the Vanir, and then the Vanir kind of are subsumed under the Aesir. And we also have,
Ah,
because of Freya, we have that perspective of, the Vanir and the impact that that had on them to have been, conquered essentially by the Aesir. So it's
mhm.
cool. I really like they know
Yeah,
what they're doing, that's for sure.
yeah. So Muspelheim and Niflheim were there in the primordial chaos, right?
Yep,
You
there was one
mentioned
on
that.
each side and then the gap, the gaping void
Yep.
between the
Hmm.
yawning gap, Gununga gap.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. So then all the other realms, Midgard, Asgard, Vanaheim, things like that, they were all created once Ymir was killed, and Odin and his
mhm.
brothers really kind of fashioned everything.
Exactly. That seems to be what the sources tell us. So it's sometimes, it's so inconsistent. In some sources you get like, oh, all of a sudden there's a new realm that's like mentioned only in one place or something like that. But so
Yeah.
it's not we don't get one kind of comprehensive picture of exactly how everything happened, but it is clear
Hmm.
that those two realms, this like super hot realm of Muspelheim, where Surtur comes from, the fire
Yeah.
demon that eventually is going to consume and Freyr and at Ragnarok and
Hmm.
be part of the destruction of the gods. And then the cold realm of Niflheim as
Hmm.
well. And I explain why I say Haim and not Heim.
Yeah. Sorry.
And the pronunciation. No, 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 no. You said Haim. You said Haim. I just want
Oh,
to say
did
that
I?
I
Haim.
explain why I say Haim instead of Heim in the pronunciation video because
Hmm.
and if you don't watch that, I'll just say quickly, it's because the word for heim, which is home or world or kind of realm, in this context is from like the Icelandic heimur or the Old Norse heimur, which I just don't say the R for the case ending. But anyway,
How about Yggdrasil? Was that always present as well, like within all this, or
yeah, it
is
kind
that
of
one of
gets
those things that
brought,
just kind of shows up
it kind of shows
at some
up,
point?
and it seems like it's one of those things like it's they describe that there's Asgard and they say that all of a sudden like the central or holy place of the gods is the ash Yggdrasil and
Hmm.
it says that that there was some of its roots like extend to down where the frost giants are where Ginnungagap once was, but I'm not entirely
Hmm.
sure about like whether it was meant like it doesn't describe when they're creating the world out of Ymir's body parts, like that there was a
Hmm.
tree. All of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, there's a tree. But Snorri's also
Yeah.
trying to reconcile a lot of like different accounts because there was no like one, canonical source that said exactly how things happened. So what Snorri's doing in Prose Edda is like taking a whole bunch of different accounts and trying to bring them together into something that is like linear and makes sense and like reconciles inconsistencies. So
Hmm. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I
yeah.
was just curious.
Yeah,
You
no, it's a
mentioned that.
really good question. And
Mhm.
it's one of the things that I think is hard, like when studying Norse mythology, is like you have to come at it with like this idea that there's going to be all kinds of inconsistencies and
Hmm.
contradictions, even within the same source. And yeah, I'm pretty sure like all of a sudden Yggdrasil is brought up in the same source. And it doesn't really say whether it was there before or not, but
Yeah.
nor does it say like, when they put the skull to create the sky, it was done around um, the tree or anything like that. So,
Yeah. I have to
uh,
imagine just with, mythology, like an oral tradition mythology, which this was right up until
yeah,
Snorri for the
absolutely.
most part. Like
Absolutely.
whoever's telling it's probably going to take their own liberties and
Absolutely. And
come
beliefs
up with new
differed among
ideas.
different communities. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beliefs differed among different communities and stuff like that. There
Hmm.
wasn't like a central place that
Yeah.
people gathered to like recite their beliefs. I mean, they gathered to like do sacrifices and stuff like that to appease the gods. But
Yep.
it was a very like it wasn't, it was a decentralized religion. It wasn't like,
Hmm.
Christianity where people congregate and, on a
Hmm.
regular basis to celebrate like a common belief system. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just looking and I don't see anything about the tree and Snorri, but if I do come across something different, I will let you know. Yeah, anyway, we can move on from that. But that was really cool. I liked that. I liked how Mimir
Yeah.
is about describing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was a great addition, I feel like, in this game to have him, especially Mimir, smartest person, to really kind
Totally.
of give all the background and the context to everything that's going on here. So
Absolutely.
it was a good
Absolutely.
device that they included him here.
Totally.
Um,
Yeah. Okay, so what's next? I mean, they told us on the vote, but let's just recap what
yep,
we're
yep. So
going to
we
be going to after this.
Yep, so we got the chisel in order to carve the rune. Now we just need to find the rune, and that's going to be in Tyr's vault. So we're going to go delving into Tyr's vault, solving some puzzles, and trying to get that rune so we can travel to Jotunheim to scatter the ashes. So
Is that back at that
get
like portal place that we were in
hmm
initially? Okay, so we're going back there.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly. Yep,
All
right in the
right.
center of the Lake of the Nine. So yeah, going to be getting into some mischief and doing all that sorts of good stuff,
Awesome.
and probably
Yeah,
brutally killing a bunch of
very
people.
good.
So
Yeah, and
should be
I'm
fun.
simultaneously making my own way through the game as we go and learning so that I can experience it firsthand. It's a lot of fun, and it's fun doing it kind of again after having
Hmm.
gone into it in so much detail this way. So
Yeah.
I'm
And you're
glad I'm doing it.
teaching a class on the Vikings now too, right?
I am. I just had my first
Yeah.
lecture yesterday. So it was an introductory lecture. And I did talk about how we're doing this. And we do have a kind of a section on modern interpretations of Vikings that I will be sure to include, this game, especially within kind of gaming culture in general, with kind
Yeah.
of the Viking Age on. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's
We can
yeah.
do a little branch away from God of War too to talk a little bit about that too, because I think that's
Yeah,
really
and
interesting.
I've had some great other kind of suggestions of things to look into that I'm definitely going to be adding to my list as we go. There's a lot of great content
Yeah.
out there. So
Yeah. I
always happy
agree.
for recommendations.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And yeah, we'll be back soon with some more stuff going on to Tears Vault and continuing up the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.